Welcome to Magnum Firearms. This is Richard Reloads, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about getting into hand loading on a budget.
Bought a money corner just so I can fuck a star. Run the money back, 27 current high. I got money now, so I'm hitting home runs. Shopping in stocks and it's 5-store launch. Bought a money corner just so I can fuck a star. Run the money back, 27 current high. I got money now, so I'm hitting home runs. Shopping in stocks.
There's three main reasons somebody would want to get into reloading. Number one is a lower cost per round, and the reason I say that instead of not saving money is because either A, there's a pretty big investment going into it, and at the beginning year or so, depending on how much you actually hand load, the payback period might take a while. Two, if it costs me 19 cents a round to buy factory 124 grain 9mm and I could load it for 13, and that's my allotted ammunition budget for a month of the year, I'm probably going to shoot a lot more 9mm. So the second reason is that you could tailor ammunition for your firearm. So for example, 30-06 is probably the only caliber that I would want to shoot groups with just for accuracy. A 223, 300 blackout, I don't really care. That's just plinking ammunition. So I want to be as accurate as I can out of my rifle, so I could find what load works best. On top of that, match grade ammunition for 30-06 is well north of $1 a round, and the absolute max it'll cost me to load it is probably about 47 cents a round. The third reason, it's just the fun of the hobby. So I can't stand watching TV. I don't let those lizards running Entertainment Tonight brainwash me. So instead of watching that shit, I'll come down here, crank out a couple hundred rounds, and have myself a good time. So getting into it, I chose to go with Lee single stage press. Honestly, it's just because I'm a cheap ass, and that was the lowest price press that was worth a damn. Looking back on it, I'm actually really happy I went with the single stage press, not because of saving money over a turret press or a progressive press, but because it isolates every step of the reloading process. If you make a mistake, you're not going to have 500 pound rounds. You'll learn pretty quick that that's not the way it's done, and you'll learn from that pretty quick. So it came in the kit. I got the Lee, I think it was the 50th anniversary. There's two different versions of the kit. One comes with a press-mounted priming option, and then the other one comes with a hand priming tool. I went with the hand priming tool, but the other one's also a good option. And honestly, I like priming in the press on the downstroke, this priming arm. I like doing that on pistol just because if you could maximize the efficiency in a single-stage press, that's always nice. But for rifle, I like hand priming because you have to swage out the military primer pockets, and we're kind of go over that a little bit further later on in the video. Also included with the press, I mentioned the hand priming tool. Powder funnel came with it, I believe. Scale and powder thrower, and honestly, those are pretty good. That one leaks a little bit of powder, so it's kind of annoying, but it's not the end of the world. The scale is pretty good. Going back towards the powder charger, I noticed that it tends to throw better charges with flake powder and cylindrical powder, and with spherical powder it's not as accurate, but it's still good enough for just plinking ammunition. The kit also came with a trimmer, and that trimmer's dog shit. You can just throw it right out or take it to the scrapyard. So the next important thing that goes along with reloading is dies. Obviously, if you have the press, you need the dies. I load for a couple different calibers, use a couple different brands of dies, and I'll just kind of go into my thoughts about each manufacturer. As of right now, I'm just running with cheap dies. Like I mentioned earlier, I just want cheap practice ammo. So I don't really need match grade dies or anything like that. Lee, I'm a big fan of Lee dies. They are a little bit prone to surface rust, and a couple of my dies are getting a little rusty, but a part of that is also living in a humid environment, and sometimes the dehumidifier gets full and nobody empties it for a couple days, so that's kind of just a problem with living in the Northeast. Besides that, I really like their dies. They have an O-ring, so it really gets a tight fit on here, and you don't have to deal with locking with a lock nut assembly like you do with RCBS and Hornady. Moving to RCBS, I like their dies. They are, at least their cheaper dies, are a little bit prone to surface rust as well. But I'm using their 2-die set. I'm not as concerned with accuracy because obviously it's 223. That's just kind of plinking caliber for me. I've had a lot of really good luck with those. Moving on to Hornady. Hornady are a little bit higher priced, but I don't really think it's worth it. So they had a lot of problems with their decapping pin and expander ball following with brass on the downstroke, and yeah, we can insert a clip there later. They were supposed to fix it with a zip spindle, and they were using the older system on a 30-06 and 243. I got these from a friend whose grandpa passed away. So they were older dies. They were supposed to fix it with a 300 blackout, and it's still dog shit. So honestly, I shoot bow tail bullets. I just completely scrap the expander ball, and it's worked fine for me. Next topic we're going to be talking about is trimming your brass. Now, with pistol brass, you don't really have to worry about it as much. Pistol rounds are obviously a lot lower pressure than rifles, and they don't expand as much as a result. The only time you might need to trim your pistol brass is if you're converting your 9mm Luger brass to something like 380 or 9x18 Makarov, but that's kind of further on down the road. Now, with rifle brass, obviously rifle rounds are a lot higher pressured, so you will have a lot more brass stretching. And please, for the love of Christ, do not buy a cheap brass trimmer. You're going to waste your time and you're going to hate yourself. These are the world's finest trimmer by a company called Little Crow Gunworks. They are kind of pricey, but they are worth their weight in gold. The biggest bottleneck constraint of loading on a single stage press is your brass prep, and this makes it incredibly easy. Just to show you right here, I just cut this 300 blackout brass from some 223 cases, left it a little bit long just because I would rather be precise with it than rather than making the mistake of cutting it way too short on the saw. Now this chucks right up in your drill. You can see this one's for 300 blackout. I'm going to chuck it up right here. And like I said, this is a little bit longer. 300 blackout isn't as high of a pressure round, so it won't take this long to trim normally, but this is freshly cut brass. And even that is a lot longer than normal, and it is perfectly sized, no measuring, because there is a set screw that holds the end mill bit at the right depth, so once you set it, you just kind of forget about it. Another good option would be the Hornady cam trimmer. That's a good option, but that is hand powered, so if you're loading in bulk like I am for 223, might not be a good option for you. But if you're loading for a lot more precise rounds, let's say you're into old milsurps and you're trimming your 8mm Mauser brass or your 30-06, whatever it might be, if you're shooting for less volume calibers, then that might be a good option for you as well. Similar price point, that's probably about 80 bucks. Next topic we're going to be talking about is getting rid of the primer pocket crimp. Now you only really have to deal with that if you're shooting a lot of military brass, so 7.62 by 51, 223, even the civilian manufacturers are crimping their primer pockets. There is some 9mm, but it's not as common. So basically what the crimp is, it's a little fold in the brass that holds a primer pocket in, and there's two really good ways to get rid of it, especially on a budget. First way being a swager. So there will be a punch that will come in and physically remove the brass, or you can get a countersinking bit or a chamfer tool. It's the same thing. You can chuck that up in your drill and you can remove the material. The swager is a little bit pricier, but you get a lot more consistent results. The chamfer tool is a lot cheaper, but you're kind of at the mercy of how precise you are with your hands. The first method that I mentioned is swaging. So if we'll zoom in here, you can see the piece of brass goes on right here, and then there's a little punch. When you run the lever, it'll reform the brass. This is a benchtop model. It's probably supposed to be bolted to the bench, but I'm kind of lazy and haven't really got around to it yet. So I'm just going to demonstrate. Piece of brass in. We're going to run the punch in there, and crimp is removed. The other way that we do have is drilling it out. So this is the chamfer tool or countersinking bit that I had mentioned. So we're going to chuck this up in the drill. I'm going to grab my piece of brass, and we are literally going to drill it out. That might have been a little bit overkill. You could see there's a lot of material removed, and that's kind of why I wanted to get away from that. I'm not as steady with my hand, and I tend to overdo things, and that's kind of why I went the route of the swager. But if you don't mind your brass kind of looking like shit sometimes, that's a lot cheaper. Next topic we're going to be talking about is cleaning your brass. There's a couple different ways you can clean it. You can go with a dry vibratory tumbler. I wanted to opt away from that because it was a little bit more expensive to get into than what I had chosen. And it's kind of loud. I'm a basement dweller. My old man's office is right upstairs, so he's making conference calls, and I'm down here being an autist. I don't really want him to get pissed off at me for reloading. There's an ultrasonic cleaner. That's probably the highest priced, so opted away from that. But it is something I want to get into in the future, and you could use that to clean gun parts as well. So it would be a good investment. Just wasn't for me at the time. I chose to go with a wet tumbler, and I just got the cheapo Harbor Freight dual drum wet tumbler. So it's fairly well constructed. I mean, for what I'm going to use it for, by the time the motor wears out, because it's a cheap Harbor Freight tool, I will have definitely got at least my money's worth out of it. I'm going with Dawn dish soap and Lemmy Shine recipe using stainless steel media. So I'll probably fill that drum up about 3/4 of the way or so with brass. A little squirt of dish soap, 2 9mm casings worth of Lemmy Shine water, and then I'll let it spin for a couple hours. We shoot at an old strip mine, so my brass gets filthy. Probably doesn't honestly need to be this clean, but I would rather have clean brass than filthy brass. Another plus to this compared to dry tumbling, other than being reduced noise, is you don't have to worry about lead dust because all the lead dust is dissolved in the water. You just dump it down the drain. On top of that, the media is reusable, so yeah, I've heard that you could wash your walnut media and throw it back in your dry tumbler, but I think that's kind of horseshit. I don't have to worry about the stainless steel media at all, except for just losing it. Obviously, it's important to have good load data. You don't want to just assume, yeah, I could put 50 grains of powder in a 223, then bam, your fucking rifle will go bazank. So I opted to go with the Nosler reloading manual, just because it was the cheapest manual on Amazon. And when I was doing my research, everybody said get several reloading manuals. That's kind of fucking stupid. Why would I do that? But Nosler only has data for Nosler bullets, and one of the not really a mistake, but one of the misconceptions that I had is that for example, each 55 grain bullet's the same, or each 240 grain jacketed hollow point for 44 Magnum's the same. They're a little bit different, just on the way that they're shaped. Your pressures are a little bit different, so there is different load data. I don't load my ammunition that hot. I'm trying to reload economically and have a pretty low price per round, but so I'm not really pushing really high pressures in any of my guns really. Now, would I recommend you going out and buying several different reloading manuals? It's probably not really worth your money. If you do want a paper copy, the Lee manual probably has the most information in that. And as well as that, all the different bullet manufacturers and powder manufacturers have load data on their website. So, for example, this does not have any load data for 150 grain 300 blackout, and I got that all right off of Hodgson's website. So, one of the mistakes I'd made was that I forgot to order shell holders on Amazon. For whatever reason, they wouldn't let me order the number 4 shell holder for 300 blackout 223 without buying at least $20 and other shit. But for whatever reason, they let me order the number 19 shell holder. This is a number 4. We have a 19 laying around here somewhere. So I ordered the number 19 shell holder, and the reason I did this is because I just watched Demo Ranch's video about the 223 and the 9mm having the same base, basically. And I just figured, fuck it, why not? I tried it, and it seemed to work okay. And then I had a couple stuck cases that literally just ripped the rim off, and I thought, I need to lube my cases more. And then once I had bought the complete shell holder kit, and I tried putting some of those pieces of brass in the number 4 shell holder, they didn't really fit all that well. I mangled the rim a little bit, but for the purposes of actually shooting in your gun, it's the extractor cloth still fits over it. In the press, I kind of have to wiggle it to get it in the number 4 shell holder, but it's not that big of a deal. I'm still kind of learning about how crimps work and how hard I should crimp or not crimp. When I was getting this 300 blackout seed and crimping die set up, I had the crimp cranked way up, and kind of looks like I got a little Uranus thing going on here with this case. So that kind of sucks because 300 blackout brass, even at this time, is a little bit pricier than 223. So obviously if you're loading on a single stage press, it's going to be a pretty long process. But there are some kind of tricks, and not only with just efficiency, just tricks in general that I had discovered in the year that I've been reloading. So number one, if you are loading brass or bulk ammunition on a single stage press, you want to do all your steps in bulk. So for example, one night I'll come down here, and then if I'm loading 223, I'll size, trim, and remove the primer pocket crimp on 150 pieces of brass. The next day I'll come back down. I forgot to mention I prime after that as well. So the next day I'll come down the basement and I will prime, seat, and crimp the bullets, and I'll do 150 at a time. So that helps me to save some time. On top of that, so when I pick my brass up at the range, I just have a range pickup bucket, and I keep the number 19 shell holder in here because for the purpose of punching out the primer, there isn't really, it doesn't get stuck up in the die. And we can show you right here. There is literally nothing in the die except for the punch to knock out the primers, so you don't really have to worry about it getting stuck. So you can use a not 100% correct shell holder. It won't mangle the rim. And then from there, then I'll sort and then I'll clean. When you're cleaning your brass, you don't want to have different calibers, with a couple exceptions. So 9 will get stuck inside of 40, 40 will get stuck inside of 45, so they won't get cleaned. But if you're using the same caliber or same bullet diameter, so for example 30-06 and 300 blackout, you could tumble those together, or you could go with 223 and 300 blackout because it's the same parent case. So a couple times I have lost primers or those just get seated sideways and they get all fucked up. So what I do is, if I have any mishaps, I will have a box of primers that is specifically for just screw ups, where if, because I reload 50 at a time, let's say I seat a primer in sideways, I'm not going to continually run out of boxes for just whatever reason. It's just something that I like doing. So I'll have a box where, let's say I lost a primer and broke one. I'll just grab 2 out of the designated box. So kind of what the old FUDs will tell you is you need to count your firings on your brass. You need to keep it all labeled together. I don't really do any of that, especially for 9, 223, 300 blackout. I try to shoot a lot of those. So I just shoot them in bulk, honestly. It doesn't matter if it's freshly picked up or if I've fired it 8 times. It's all the same to me. I'll size it, just treat it like it's normal. Once a brass is bad, I'll throw it out. But I shoot mixed head SAMs. I'm not really all that concerned about accuracy. I'm just looking for the easiest way to make bulk ammunition safely in my basement. This probably isn't going to be the first video you watch about reloading, but if it is something that you're interested in, don't be scared to hop into it. You want to make sure you do all your research. There's a lot of great places on YouTube that can teach you a lot better than I could ever dream of. For example, Johnny's Reloading Bench, Iraq Veteran 8888, they have a lot of good reloading content. And then there's some smaller channels too, like Elvis Ammo and Fortune Cookie 45LC. Just watching a couple of their random videos, you learn so much about the reloading process. Understand that it's going to be a pretty big time investment and there's going to be a lot of attention to detail that goes into it. But I promise you, loading your own ammunition, it will be worth it in the end. If you have any questions, don't be scared to ask people that know a lot more than you. Either on YouTube, but sometimes those guys can be a little bit hard to get a hold of. What I found the best reference to be whenever I have questions is Reddit. On the reloading sub on Reddit, they'll only get pissed off if you're asking, what's the best entry level, this and that, because they already answered all those questions. But if you have a specific question about loading ammunition, those guys will help you out and will be happy to do it. Another pointer, when you're making your own ammo, economies of scale are on your side. Try to buy in bulk. And I use a lot of compatible powders. So, for example, I use Hodgson H110. Yeah, that's good for all your Magnum pistols, some shotguns, and 300 blackout. IMR 4895, that's a pretty diverse rifle powder. Yeah, you can load from 223 all the way up to 4570 with that. And buying them in 8-pound jugs at a time. Now, it is kind of an investment up front, but that decreases your price per round because the powder itself is cheaper. I use a couple search engines trying to find components. Probably the best one would be AmmoSeek. It's an app on your iPhone. It looks like it was designed in 1974, but that's probably the better one. Also, Gun.Deals, they have a website and an app. That's a pretty good search engine too, and I have found some good deals on there. Alright guys, so in closing, any products that I was talking highly of, if you want to get into reloading, I think those are fantastic options. Anything that I was kind of talking shit on, this is America, I can't make you or make you not do something, but I'd probably stay away from those. Thanks for watching this episode of Magnum Firearms. Follow us on Instagram, like our pictures, and if you need to get a hold of us for any reloading or any other firearm-related topic, that's the best way to do it. Have a great day, guys.
Dark clouds hanging over me, these days is on my mental. My runners cost a couple, so I'm in the club gentle. I'm in the VIP with the ice on like